This is right, Arab.
Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett, and coming up we've got latest developments on stories across the globe. We'll start with the headlines. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi says radicalism is the root cause of issues in the region. He urged SCO members to work on connectivity and trust as the crisis in Afghanistan deepens. Australia shrugs off Chinese anger over its decision to acquire nuclear-powered submarines with the help of the US and the UK. Scott Morrison also vows to defend the rule of law in airspace and waters where Beijing has hotly contested claims. A scathing ruling that accused Jacob Zuma of undermining the courts. South Africa's highest court refuses to overturn the former South African president's 15-month jail sentence for failing to attend a corruption inquiry. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro says he will not get a COVID-19 vaccine to attend the UN General Assembly next week. The Assembly's leaders announced that all attendees must be vaccinated to speak at the gathering. Myanmar's junta will put ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi on trial for corruption, adding to a raft of ongoing cases that could see her jailed for decades. Suu Kyi's been under house arrest since a coup in February. With echoes of the Lehman crisis, analysts say China's Evergrande's $300 billion of unpaid debt could spread to other economies. And New Zealand cricket suspend their tour of Pakistan due to security concerns just minutes before the first ODI was scheduled to begin. New Zealand say they received intelligence from their government about a security threat. The annual summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is being held in Tajikistan's capital, Dushanbe. The focus of the meeting is recent developments in Afghanistan and regional security. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi led the Indian delegation at the 21st SCO meeting. Citing the Afghanistan situation, PM Modi raised the issue of growing radicalisation and extremism in the region. He said the SCO must work on radicalisation as a priority, and India also raised the issue of counter-terrorism strategy. He made the comments in the presence of Pakistan PM Imran Khan while addressing the much-awaited summit.
मेरा मानना है कि इस क्षेत्र में सबसे बड़ी चुनौतियां शांति, सुरक्षा और ट्रस्ट डेफिसिट से संबंधित है और इन समस्याओं का मूल कारण बढ़ता हुआ रेडिकलाइजेशन है। अफगानिस्तान में हाल के घटनाक्रम ने इस चुनौती को और स्पष्ट कर दिया है। इस मुद्दे पर एससीओ को पहल लेकर कार्य करना चाहिए।
PM Modi also stressed the importance of increasing connectivity among Central Asian countries to boost their market economy. This is the fourth such summit where India has participated as a fully fledged member of the SCO.
भारत सेंट्रल एशिया के साथ अपनी कनेक्टिविटी बढ़ाने के लिए प्रतिबद्ध है। हमारा मानना है कि लैंडलॉक्ड सेंट्रल एशियाई देशों को भारत के विशाल बाजार से जुड़कर अपार लाभ हो सकता है.
China's President Xi Jinping also urged member nations to help drive a smooth transition in Afghanistan. He said SCO member states should guide Afghanistan to develop an inclusive political structure and follow moderate internal and external policies. Russian President Vladimir Putin joined the meeting via video link and called for contacts between the SCO and Kabul. Putin, however, did not mention any concrete steps.
Today, the Taliban control practically the entire territory of Afghanistan, and the new Afghan authorities should be encouraged to fulfill their own promises to establish peace, normalize public life, and ensure security for all.
Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev urged member states to unfreeze Afghanistan's assets kept in foreign banks and pushed for the facilitation of dialogue with the Taliban government in Kabul. This after the US denied access to any Afghan assets in its central banks. The International Monetary Fund has also said Afghanistan will not have access to its resources. The Uzbek president echoed Prime Minister Modi's efforts to prevent the rise of extremism. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan called for economic support for Afghanistan. He said the urgent priorities are to prevent a humanitarian crisis and economic meltdown. In what appeared to be a dig at the Ghani government, Imran Khan said the previous administrations in Afghanistan had depended heavily on foreign aid and warned its removal could lead to an economic collapse in the country. He urged the Taliban to create an inclusive political structure with ethnic groups. Pakistan has had deep ties with the Taliban and has been accused of supporting the group as it battled the US-backed government in Kabul for 20 years. Islamabad has repeatedly denied these charges. Host nation Tajikistan proposed creating a security belt around Afghanistan to prevent the potential expansion of terrorist groups. Afghanistan's neighbour Kazakhstan also called on the bloc to launch an informal dialogue with the new Afghan government. The Kazakh president raised concerns over a desperate food and humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. The 8-member Shanghai Cooperation Organization has been going 21 years. Its member states are China, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, India and Pakistan. This year's SCO summit was the first meeting of the heads of states since the Taliban's takeover of Kabul. And we can cross live now to WION's principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal, who is joining us from New Delhi. And Siddhant, can we say that any firm measures or action points have come out of this summit?
Well, even as we speak right now, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's speech is being played and he is talking about Afghanistan. This is a significant statement made by the Indian Prime Minister. For the first time, the Indian Prime Minister is just speaking on Afghanistan since Taliban takeover. Whatever I can hear, the biggest key takeaway from the Indian Prime Minister's speech was that the government or the dispensation, to use the word or the phrase, is not inclusive. This is the Indian government for the first time saying that the dispensation is not inclusive. It does not have women representation, and it was formed without any negotiations, any talks. So clearly India has for the first time taken the position on the development at the SCO meeting, and this was expected in terms of SCO countries having, of course, key stakes in Afghanistan. Instability in the region in Afghanistan impacts two Central Asian countries, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, who share land border with Afghanistan, and they fear that there can be a refugee influx in their country. But other than that, we know that earlier also the Indian Prime Minister spoke. He talked about how Sufism, a moderate strand of Islam, can benefit the region in terms of fighting radicalism. This the Sufism is something that was popular and remains popular in the Central Asian region. He talked about connectivity as well at the SCO meeting, talking about how connectivity should be transparent. This, of course, is directed at China, given the fact that the Chinese connectivity projects are projects which do not follow transparency, financial accountability.
और अफगानिस्तान के हर भाग में हमने अपना योगदान दिया है। आज भी हम अपने अफगान मित्रों तक खाद्य सामग्री, दवाइयां आदि पहुंचाने के लिए इच्छुक हैं। हम सभी को मिलकर ये सुनिश्चित करना चाहिए कि अफगानिस्तान तक मानवीय सहायता निर्विघ्न तरीके से पहुंच सके। एक्सेलेंसीज, अफगान और भारतीय लोगों के बीच सदियों से एक विशेष संबंध रहा है। अफगान समाज की सहायता के लिए हर क्षेत्रीय या वैश्विक पहल को भारत का पूर्ण सहयोग रहेगा। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
हो गया? Prime Minister Narendra Modi talking about Afghanistan. It is for the first time that the Indian Prime Minister has talked about Afghanistan. Just on Afghanistan.
Security Pact for the Asia Pacific. It's being seen as an effort to counter China's perceived military expansionism. The Trilateral Security Partnership is known by its acronym AUKUS and aims to share intelligence, defence and technology between the three nations. AUKUS will also help equip Australia with nuclear-powered submarines. Beijing stakes a claim for the entire South China Sea and has been building up its naval capabilities there. You are looking at the U-shaped 9-dash line, which includes 90% of the South China waters. The line, which was adopted in the 1940s, demarcates China's claim over the sea and the land contained within. But exactly how strong is China's military? Well, in recent decades, the Chinese government's invested heavily in state-owned and private sector defence companies. China is estimated to be the world's second largest arms producer. Its latest and most advanced pieces of military equipment include new light arms, an aircraft carrier task group and a hypersonic missile. China's also developed several unmanned aerial vehicles with plateau operation capabilities. Right now, only 6 countries in the world possess nuclear submarines: France, Britain, Russia, the US, China and India. And with the AUKUS alliance, Australia will acquire a fleet of nuclear-powered submarines. The AUKUS allies say it's aimed at protecting stability in the Indo-Pacific. The 3 countries say they will work together to ensure peace in the region. Meanwhile, India has a wider stake in the South China Sea, as nearly 55% of India's trade with the Indo-Pacific region passes through these waters. A sizable portion of world trade that passes through the Malacca Straits. China is also seen as threatening Taiwan. And in the face of those threats, Taiwan has decided to upgrade its weapons. The island nation plans to spend an extra 240 billion Taiwan dollars on defence over the next 5 years. Australia is shrugging off, though, Chinese anger over its decision to acquire US nuclear-powered submarines. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison's vowed to defend the rule of law in airspace and waters where Beijing has those hotly contested claims. The AUKUS deal sees Washington agreeing to extend US nuclear submarine technology to Australia, as well as cyber defence, applied artificial intelligence and undersea capabilities. China's governments described the alliance as an extremely irresponsible threat to regional stability. Questioning Australia's commitment to nuclear non-proliferation, Beijing has warned the Western allies that they risk shooting themselves in the foot. However, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison's rejected Chinese criticism, saying that China has its own very substantive programme of nuclear submarine building.
We're just doing what we need to do to keep Australians safe and protect our national interests. I mean, China do the same thing. They have massive investments in their military capabilities, including in this area, and Australia doesn't raise issues around that. All countries will take decisions in their national interests. We believe this will add to the peace and stability and security of the region. And that is, I think, a view that is widely shared about the impact of this arrangement, and we encourage all countries in the region to engage in that way.
Morrison says Australia is very aware of China's nuclear submarine capabilities and growing military investment. He says his government has to respond to the realities in the region.
They're an important part of France, particularly here in the Pacific, where we have so many shared interests, and so we'll work through that, and that's necessary. We don't have any issue with what, obviously France and particularly Naval Group with the attack class submarine were seeking to do. It was a good submarine, it was a conventional submarine, and that no longer met our needs. So we had to do what was in our national interests, and I'm sure that President Macron would always act in France's national interests, and so too must Australia.
Morrison also clarified the reasoning behind cancelling a multi-billion-dollar submarine deal with France, which has angered Paris. He says Australia's current security needs compel it to have nuclear-powered submarines instead of the conventional submarines which France was set to provide.
中午及傍晚将开展舰机协同反潜科目。
Hinting at China's aggressive posturing in the South China Sea, Morrison says Australia wants to ensure that international waters are always international waters and international skies are international skies. And he says that the rule of law should apply equally in all of these places. Australian Defence Minister Peter Dutton was even more dismissive of the reaction from some Chinese officials and government-backed media, describing it as counterproductive, immature and frankly embarrassing. To West Africa now, and at an emergency summit of the Economic Community of West African States, or Ecowas, the groups imposed sanctions against the junta in Guinea and those slowing Mali's post-coup transition. It's the toughest response yet from Ecowas to a run of military takeovers. Regional heads of state meeting in Ghana have decided to freeze financial assets and impose travel bans on Guinea's junta members. The blocs also added pressure on Mali's transitional government, demanding they stick to an agreement to organise elections for February 2022 and present an electoral roadmap by next month.
West African leaders gathered in Ghana's capital city, Accra, on Thursday to decide how they can steer Guinea back towards constitutional rule after a coup ousted President Alpha Condé last week. The 15-nation Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, condemned the coup and has suspended Guinea from the bloc's decision-making bodies. The leaders were to hear a report from a ministerial mission that went to Guinea's capital, Conakry, on Friday to meet the ruling junta. Ghana's president, Nana Akufo-Addo, is the ECOWAS chairman.
We are required to take informed decisions on these matters that will have long-term consequences for the stability and the defense of the democratic values of our region. I count on you, Excellencies, to help proffer durable solutions to the crisis. And I'm confident that, as in the past, we will rise to the occasion.
The junta in Guinea, led by Mamadi Doumbouya, a former member of the French Foreign Legion, is holding consultations with various public figures, groups and business leaders in the country to map a framework for a transitional government. As part of the 4-day consultation, the junta will meet with Guinea's main business lobby and executives of mining firms operating in its bauxite, gold, iron ore and diamond sectors. The junta has not said how long the transitional government will last or who will lead it.
To ease a crippling energy crisis in Lebanon, Hezbollah has started bringing Iranian fuel into the country via Syria. The move's been supported by the Shiite Muslim group, but opponents say it risks US sanctions. Dozens of trucks carrying Iranian oil entered northeastern Lebanon, where Hezbollah's yellow flag fluttered from lampposts.
With Lebanon in the midst of an energy crisis, the militant group Hezbollah brought Iranian fuel into the country via Syria on Thursday. The trucks sounded their horns as they entered the northeastern village of Al Ain. The shipment risks stirring the wrath of the US, which has imposed sanctions on Iran. But that was of little concern to these onlookers, who waved Hezbollah's flag and threw petals at the vehicles. One local businessman said he hoped more would come.
This convoy is to break the siege and monopoly. It's the first, and hopefully another will follow, and the situation will improve for the poor, thanks to the low prices.
Washington has reiterated that US sanctions on Iranian oil sales remain in place, but it has not said whether it is considering taking any action over the move by Hezbollah, which it designates a terrorist group. The action marks an expansion of Hezbollah's role in Lebanon, where critics have long accused the heavily armed group of acting as a state within the state. The Lebanese government said its permission was not sought to import the fuel. Politics aside, the situation in the country is desperate. An economic crisis has seen the currency sink about 90% over the past 2 years, pushing more than 3/4 of the population into poverty. Fuel supplies have dried up because Lebanon does not have enough hard currency to cover even vital imports. Essential services, including some hospitals, have been forced to scale back or shut down. Hezbollah has said it will donate some of the oil to institutions in need, including government hospitals and orphanages.
Facebook says it will change its approach and be more aggressive in shutting down coordinated groups of real user accounts involved in certain harmful activities on its platform. The new strategy used by Facebook will be the same used to act against fake accounts. Facebook says this will counter groups of coordinated real accounts that systematically break the rules, where users falsely report a target's content or account to try and get it shut down. Online harassment, where users might coordinate to target an individual through mass posting or comments, will also be checked.
Facebook is taking a more aggressive stance against harmful users, aiming their anti-troll strategy designed for fake accounts to take down real users. The company told Reuters the new approach uses tactics usually taken by Facebook's security teams for wholesale shutdowns of networks engaged in influence operations that use false accounts to manipulate public data, such as Russian troll farms. It could have major implications for how the social media giant handles political and other coordinated movements breaking its rules at a time when Facebook's approach to abuse on its platforms is under heavy scrutiny from global lawmakers and citizen groups. The approach will target real accounts that systemically break its rules through mass reporting, where many users falsely report a target's content or account to get it shut down, or brigading, a type of online harassment where users might coordinate to target an individual through mass posts or comments. The expansion means Facebook security teams could take more sweeping actions than the company removing posts or individual accounts as it otherwise might. High-profile instances of coordinated activity around last year's U.S. election, from teens and K-pop fans claiming they used TikTok to sabotage a rally for former President Donald Trump in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to political campaigns paying online meme makers, have also sparked debates on how platforms should define and approach coordinated campaigns.
A Dutch museum has unveiled a previously unknown work by Vincent van Gogh, a study for one of his best-known drawings, Worn Out. In the drawing, an old man sits in a chair with his head in his hands. Discoveries of works by the famously troubled artist who died in 1890 are extremely rare.
autoriteitsbezoek kon hij uit de lucht vallen, volstrekt onbekend. Maar dat als je dus met deze techniek kijkt, ja, het kan wel een onbezinnig zijn, maar dat gelad, dat zie je eigenlijk.
People come to the museum, so they think they have Van Gogh. In this case, they were perhaps more or less knowledgeable of the thing that they had of Van Gogh. The only thing was, the one they had was never out in the public, so it had never been exhibited, was never written about. So when they came to the museum, it came as a big surprise that there all of a sudden was this new Van Gogh.
Van Gogh chose this subject early on in his career when he was working in The Hague, and he was really interested in sort of the ordinary person. He was also looking to express emotion here, and it's kind of interesting that this has come up at this moment. I think we were all coming out of a COVID period feeling like this, and the amazing thing is that we can share this with our visitors.
And that's it for this edition of WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett. Do join me again next week for more global news and updates. Do stay tuned though to WION World is One.
There are many other